Today, I'm not going to tell you what to think, what you ought or ought not to do. I'm simply going to present facts that have forever changed how I view the start of human life. First, let's define life. What exactly constitutes life? Over the years, there have been many definitions proposed for life. Philosophers, theologians, scientists have all composed their own definitions of life, but today I am solely concerned with the biological definition of life. Merriam-Webster, the medical edition, defines life as, quote, a state of living characterized by capacity for metabolism, growth, reaction to stimuli, and reproduction, end quote. This is a highly simplified version of the definition of life that is commonly accepted by the scientific world. I will expand this definition in accordance to molecular biologist Daniel E. Koshland, Jr., who outlined 7 components necessary for life in an essay published in the March 22, 2002 issue of the journal Science. The first stipulation he put forth is that, quote, living things must have a program to make copies of themselves from generation to generation, end quote. This program Koshland is talking about is basically DNA and the processes of replicating DNA and the metabolic reactions that sustain a living thing. The second stipulation he puts forth is that, quote, life adapts and evolves in step with external changes in the environment, end quote. The third component for life is that, quote, organisms tend to be complex, highly organized, and most importantly, have compartmentalized structures, end quote. The primary example of this is cells and the organelles contained within the cells. The cell is the basic functioning unit of life, and the organization and compilation of cells produce more complex systems like organs in our bodies. The fourth stipulation is that, quote, living things have the ability to take energy from their environment and change it from one form to another, end quote. This process is initiated by what we commonly know as metabolism. The energy gleaned from the environment is usually put forth towards growth and reproduction. The fifth stipulation that Koshland lays out is that, quote, organisms have regeneration systems that replace parts of themselves that are subject to wear and tear, end quote. Koshland is referring to processes that either repair or completely replace damaged systems. This process is related to asexual reproduction. The sixth component of life is that, quote, living creatures respond to environmental stimuli through feedback mechanisms. Cues from the environment can cause organisms to react through behavior, metabolism, and physiological change, end quote. This is fairly self-explanatory. When something in our environment changes, such as the temperature increasing, our body responds and we start to sweat to cool off. The seventh component of life is that, quote, organisms are able to maintain numerous metabolic reactions even in a single instance of time. So you could be having mitosis, meiosis, all sorts of metabolic reactions happening at the same time. Excuse me. So now that we have laid a solid foundation for the definition of life, I'd like to look at the process of conception and how it matches up to Koshland's definition of life. The first step of conception is having a viable mature egg. The egg is the largest cell in the human body, measuring 1/10 millimeter in diameter, just shy of being visible by the naked eye. All around the mature egg are cells which provide it with nutrition and oxygen for the first couple of days after it's fertilized. The genetic material is all stored inside the nucleus, which is the target for the sperm. The process of conception begins when 500 million sperm enter the woman's body, all racing each other to be the first one to reach and embed into the egg. The sperm takes somewhere between 10 and 20 hours to drill through the hard material surrounding the nucleus of the egg. The DNA of the male is located in the head of the sperm, and behind the genes is a centriole, which plays an important role when the fertilized egg begins dividing. The head of the sperm swells up, losing its tail, and the nucleus of the egg and the nucleus of the sperm meet and fuse. In the exact moment when they meet and genetic information is exchanged, a unique genetic code is created, and the result is a human embryo. This is when I propose that life begins. At this point inside the eggshell, there is a fertilized egg in which billions of cells will develop into a human body. Soon after, the cell divides into two identical cells. This is where the centriole I mentioned earlier will come into play. The centriole brought by the sperm distributes the genetic material to the divided cell, at which point the process of mitosis and meiosis start going like crazy and duplicating cells. Let's pause at this point. So far, we have fulfilled all the components of life. Don't believe me? Let's go back and take a look. This human embryo has its own DNA, fulfilling component number 1. It is divided and replicated with its own genetic code and begun metabolic processes and reproduction through mitosis and meiosis, fulfilling components number 3, 5, and 7. And it has gleaned energy from the layers of oxygen and nutrition cells surrounding the egg, and the fertilized egg, which is component number 4. And it can sense changes in the environment, adjusting to the changes in energy source, metabolic processes, and its location changing to the uterus, fulfilling component number 2. As you can see, the newly conceived human embryo fulfills all the components for life. The embryo builds upon all these components throughout birth, or throughout the process towards birth. At all times, it is alive. Not once does it not fulfill all the components required for life. I'd encourage you to think about life, when it starts, and what life means, but I leave you to your own conclusions. The facts that I have presented today have established my views and beliefs surrounding the miracle of life, and I encourage you to figure out what you yourself believe. Thank you.